Right, welcome everybody to this last session, which James asked me to put together specially. So this is a one-off. You won't ever see this panel again, if you're lucky, except if Sue McGregor calls them back in 20 years' time. And trying to wrap up everything we've seen today, we've seen, a 360-degree view of the industry. We've seen a very interesting combinations of standard people talking to us. We've seen BT expand our universe with beautiful pictures, and we've seen some semblance of normality. But it's all about the money, folks. It's all about investment. In this industry, there are manufacturers, developers, integrators, and partners in technology, and there are investors in that technology. And this panel aims to try and wrap up the whole day to see how they get a good ROI in their investment. So there's no futures in this panel, there's no dreaming. It's about real projects that our investors have worked on in the last year, whether they thought they got a good ROI, how they measured it, and also our suppliers here, what they think about how they're treated in that and whether they can contribute to that ROI. I will introduce everybody as quickly as possible so that they may speak for your edification. So, ladies first. Oh. Sinead Greenaway is Director of Technology and Operations at UK TV. UK TV is owned by BBC Worldwide and Scripps. You'll know UK TV by how you see it on screen. It's an extremely distinctive broadcaster. You see Dave, you see Watch, and it looks great on everyone's platform. I'm a big admirer of your channel branding and your promos, and as I said earlier, the UK TV app is the one that's got me off the Sky app. So very contemporary snapshot of what UK TV's up to. Our second investor is Mr. Tom Griffiths, and Tom is Director of Broadcast and Distribution Technology at ITV. Now, Tom looks after ITV's platforms for airtime sales, for rights management, for linear and non-linear content scheduling, for broadcast, for IP and VOD content delivery, as well as all of their relationships with their third-party service providers. Tom's also a member of the IET and also a section manager on the UK board of SIMTI at the moment. My third investor, Mr. Steve Plunkett, standing in at the last minute for Joachim from Ericsson Broadcast and Media Services. Steve's really in the hot seat here because as an investor in media technology, he has to be every bit as astute as these two, but then also look at that to develop value-added services and provide those more scalably, more robustly, higher quality, better price than anybody. Piece of cake, really. On the other side, we have two very esteemed solution providers. So Tony Taylor is CEO and chairman of media asset management trailblazers, Transmedia Dynamics. I think the clue's in the name. And TMD is one of the most long-standing MAM vendors or workflow solutions vendors in the industry. And they really have tackled some 800-pound gorillas in their time. I would just like to give a small shout out to Tony because Tony was actually the first person years ago to show me working frame accurate browse, something we take for granted today. But Tony very much impressed me with that. And he was also the first person to explain to me what media workflow was. And it's, again, another commonplace term. And Tony also explained to me in those days what workflow would do to versioning and multi-outlet broadcasting. So that's TMD. And by no means least, Ben Davenport, who's Director of Marketing at Global MAM Solution vendor Delette. Now, what's really important about Ben's contribution here as well is that having previously served on the front line with vendors like Harmonic and Amberfin, he's one of the leading lights to me who actually knows his way around file formats, storage formats, video formats, the key nuts and bolts that we're all trying to make sense of. Ben also has a very strong sense in his marketing role of what's said in the industry right now and the difference between the truth and the marketing and around the standards bodies and stuff. So as it's the last panel of the day, would you give a small ripple of applause for your panel? Just to wait for you. Thank you very much. So Tom, if I can turn to you, just the first question. I was talking to our audience in the break. What are the kind of things that you consider when planning a good ROI?
It's a good question. I think, to be honest, I think we would say start with ground zero, actually. Actually start, rather than perhaps a traditional route of saying, I've got some money to spend on technology, or there's a technology to invest in, how might I use it? Rather start from the point of actually saying, why invest anything in new technology? Actually, what is the business paradigm that's making me want to invest in something? what is the business challenge that I'm trying to address? I mean, you can broadly, I think, put it into kind of two categories. There are the more obvious ones, launching a new service, whether it be a new channel or perhaps bringing on a syndication partner or some new business venture where technology is clearly perhaps a key component of achieving that, and therefore it's an obvious part of the business case. More challenging, perhaps, are the other ones where it's more about addressing a challenge you've currently got in the business or opening up opportunities for new business, but isn't necessarily of itself directly related to some new revenue stream. And actually, in that second area, at ITV over the last few years, we've kind of thought about three areas, really. Risk reduction, operational efficiency, and business agility. And if, in looking at any particular technology, if it isn't answering something positively in one of those three, then I think we would ask the question about why would we invest in it.
Right.
So I start from an annual basis. In fact, we're in budget round now for next year, and we start with a zero budget. And then everything from there on is justified by there being some business rationale for it. Now, sometimes that technology investment is very much a refresh. So the risk reduction, it might be, something is at end of life and needs refreshing. But usually, even then, we're trying to get something more out of it than just a direct like-for-like replacement. Can we improve the quality of what we're doing? Can we improve our disaster recovery or resilience? Or can, by investing in that new technology, we also be quicker to add services in future?
And the floor has talked a lot about new business models and disruption. Those are more opaque areas to look into and make a good bet. But how do you work with that?
I think it is more opaque, and sometimes there isn't always an obvious investment return, and I think you have to look at more than just one particular lever and say what are you trying to achieve. Cloud is an interesting example. So we're moving into cloud in a number of places. We're not going wholesale saying, right, cloud is great, let's switch off on-prem infrastructure and move to the cloud. Rather, we're saying, actually, where is cloud going to help us with something? So a good example of that might be where agility, for example. So actually, our view is that even when you're using cloud in a well-optimized kind of way, in a pure TCO terms, it can still be more expensive than on-prem infrastructure.
As everyone's still telling us. Yeah.
But if actually it allows me to launch something as 3 months, because actually the infrastructure takes a couple of days to set up, and after that it's just the development that sits on top of that, compared to 3 months to set up the infrastructure.
Yeah, by agility,
actually it's worth having that.
By agility, do you mean flexible bursting of services? What do you mean?
In that instance, I mean simply time to market.
Right.
So if I can do something faster, I can deliver some real value back to the business. The usual experience I've got is that the business comes, I've got this great idea, how long is it going to take? And the answer is it's always going to take too long and cost too much. So if there's something I can do to actually make it cost less or land quicker, then it has a value of itself.
Perhaps I can open up that to Sinead as well. Do you have the same sort of reaction that the time to market is always too long? I know that UK TV has tapped into third-party services very effectively since your tenure, and you're seeking to balance on-prem and services. Do you want to talk us through that a bit? Gosh,
where do I begin? ROI. So I for those of you that don't know, I joined UK TV just about a year and a third ago. So this is quite timely because, as most of the people in this room will know, we've been out to market on just about everything. So we have undertaken a huge business refresh, which is a technology-enabled refresh. And I think the starting point for us is always the same, which is strategy. And we have a very simple strategy, which is driven by growth of SOCI, how we measure ourselves in advertising share terms.
9.5%, I saw.
Nearly up to the 10, which, we're in contender space now. And that, but beautifully, and the word I use a lot is agility. We're not too big. So I'll come on to some of the innovation work, and we do a lot of that with Ericsson, so I'd like to talk about that. But it's really slide rule of, does it grow SOCI? Does it help us to grow our VOD footprint, and does it underpin our IP growth strategy, which is very much about us creating our own content? As that translates into technology, it's then further refined around agility and putting digital at the heart. Walking into a business, we're a terrifically successful business, but frankly, the tools have not been good enough. They were great tools a decade ago. And, for us, opening up speed to market, opening up flexibility, I'm genuinely engaged with the opportunity of IP and virtualization, because it's not about straight ROI. Do I spend less money or more money? It's actually about us looking at our portfolio and thinking, if I did more or less, could I have arrangements that help me to flex? And that's the sort of thing that we're really looking at.
And strategically, that's exactly what broadcasters should be doing to get to stay in the game and keep in the game. Yeah, that's what the insurgents are doing against you.
Absolutely, and therefore I think we have to think smarter. Every business case we've made this year for at least 6 or 7, which have been called business systems and beyond, have on paper produced a positive ROI, but that's been a mix of genuine like for like. We do a lot of outsource, so we've got a good way, you go to market, you can measure.
What do you measure?
So we measure a number of things, and I think, again, some of you who'll be familiar with the way we write our ROIs are quite unusual. So we talk a lot about partnership, relationship. It's academic almost. We know most of the suppliers. We know what the kit does. It's very much more, can we work with you?
So you're prepared to score the intangibles?
Yeah, we score the intangibles because that's the relationship. And actually we invest more time getting out, meeting, being on premise, as opposed to doing a paper exchange. That tells me absolutely nothing about the businesses that I'm working with. And then finally, because obviously let everybody else talk, but because of our size, I think we're really good partners for play, and I like to sort of foster a bit of a sandpit. So Steve and I have been doing, and a couple of the team here who have been outstanding, Steve and Richard, looking at, we wouldn't individually invest in IP, but that's something we would work with Ericsson on to great effect. So without taking the big plunge, we sort of both put our feet in the water. We bring the content and channel thinking, and these guys bring the technical brains.
And it's a good example of the partner question that came up. I'll just skip over you for a second, Steve, just let you relax there. Just take a step. Let's just ask the suppliers, the solution providers, does that sound fair? Is that a recognisable buying behaviour?
I think it's not generally recognisable insofar as that you're fairly unique, I would turn around and say, in scoring on can you work with people, etc. I think what we find in the buying process, if we take the buying process forward, is that it's very prescriptive in the way that RFPs are written. Then you get the legal people involved, then you get the procurement people, and it becomes very protracted. And what's lost in that is the ability to gain ROI on the project itself. It's all wrapped up in red tape. I mean, one of the projects that we did a while back was RTE in Ireland, which was probably one of the best projects we've done. What they did was, yes, they went out to tender, and yes, there was a legal process, but they went for a proof of concept, which was chargeable, other than the software. And they then took that, and I was actually in the presentation, they themselves presented the business case to the Director General based on the POC. And that business case is what won the full project. Now that worked really well, and the project then went forward really well. So they actually worked out that in the first year, they actually saved 400,000 euros. Literally, tangible 400,000 euros. So,
do you know on what scale of investment?
That was on a scale of investment of about 2.5 million euros. Okay. So that's not a bad return on investment in the first year, and that's tangible. That's not the intangibles of efficiencies and all the rest of it. That was tangible cost savings. So I think the way that the businesses today, the broadcasters, the content owners, I mean, Discovery as an organisation is absolutely brilliant at rolling out new projects. They actually go into their sites and market the project 3 months before it even starts. So that gains return on investment immediately from
That sounds like cultural barriers, though, to new technology or...
Well, I think, let's be honest, change is a cultural barrier, yeah? Nobody likes change, and the biggest problem in all of these projects is not the technology, it's the people. That's where the problems come, because unless you bring your people on board to start with and foster that mode of change, then you don't get that return on investment that you need.
Are these technologies that difficult, or is it because people have got their hands on the levers? Why is that difficult?
Well, I think it's not the technology that's difficult. As I say, the technology is easy. I think it's people's. One of the biggest statements that you hear when deploying these projects around the operational side of things is, "Well, we've always done it that way." And that barrier, those cultural barriers, are the ones that the organisations need to foster, the stakeholders need to foster, bringing those people on board before the project even gets going.
Steve, so you've got to choose better technology, buy it better, screw it together better, add value. Do you get involved in the cultural change as well, and is it affecting ROI?
Absolutely. I think we operate in many ways like a large broadcaster with many TV channels, and very complex logistical back ends, because we have multiple customers with slight variations in how they interface with us. So being really efficient at an operational level is complicated, because we haven't got a standardized relationship with all of our
You're
customers.
going to say the M word in a minute, aren't you? You're going to say multi-tenanting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We have a large focus these days, and for some time now, on managed service platforms. How can we create value in between broadcasters and technology that we create and technology that we buy from the vendor community, in such a way that makes sense to everybody involved? And that means we need to be able to create scale advantages. If we manage and originate 500 TV channels, what is it about Ericsson that allows us to, from that collective business, lower the cost to all of those different clients, still offer a quite varied set of services, so there isn't a lowest common denominator approach, because that isn't the sort of the big part of the marketplace that we're in. So it's a technology question. How do we use new technologies like the cloud, different deployment mechanisms? Releasing value early for us is particularly important. So if we write a line of code and it's used within a specific customer project, its value, its lifetime value is tied to that customer and that contract. If we write a line of code that's used in a multi-tenant platform, its value isn't bounded. Its potential is multiple clients, multiple territories, and so on. Building multi-tenant platforms, because the vendor community in broadcasting creates a single type of product, typically, that's bought by a broadcaster, and we act as a proxy for the broadcaster. If you look at the telco industry, which Ericsson's also very big in, there are two distinct categories of products. There are enterprise products and service provider products. And service providers in the telco industry buy the service provider products that have multi-tenancy built in, and they're designed for large organizations who serve lots of different customers. So we essentially have to create that ourselves from the technologies and products that we buy in the marketplace, and through software development and infrastructure that we build for ourselves. And it makes the ROI that little bit more complicated, I guess.
Must make the business case fun as well.
Yes, because we have to think about, the user of the platform is probably an Ericsson operational employee.
Yeah.
The end customer who's receiving value is one of a number of customers with varying needs. And so the way we gain efficiency advantages can be really significant, because we have lots of staff.
Yeah, you're almost saying that to make it worth your while, you have to get 2 or 3 or 4 times the value an end user would get.
Potentially,
You've got
or
to
at least
magnify it for yourselves.
or at least get that in 4 or 5 areas simultaneously.
Yes, yeah.
Revenue generating increases, efficiency savings, speed to market advantages. If we can release something in 3 months rather than 12 months, that's 9 months of revenue to lots of clients on a global basis. It makes a really big difference. So, and to Tom's point, using something like the public cloud, where maybe the cost per compute unit doesn't make sense if you look at it in that narrow context. If it means that we can get our services out more quickly, generating revenue, then actually that cost per compute unit becomes marginal in the grand scheme of things.
Now that's a lot to do with software architecture and
Yes.
modern products. So just try and bring Ben in here. Probably by seats, by number of installs, is the biggest man vendor alongside Avid or something by number of sites. So is that practical now? Is that scalable? You guys have been in this game a long time.
I think it is, and there was an interesting point from Keith from Channel 4 this morning about having the same infrastructure to support multiple platforms and the same business infrastructure, not just technological business infrastructure to deliver to that platform. And that's definitely where we've focused in terms of our technology, the ability to support not just TV with the MAN platform, but also radio and also online, and ditto in our news workflows as well. So yeah, I totally think it's feasible, it's plausible. I'd also go back to a point that you made about working in partnership. I'm going to disagree slightly with Tony because I like doing that.
More disagreements.
And I remember very clearly sitting in a meeting once with a very great man who's now retired, who said, "We are not buying technology from you. We are entering into a marriage." And he was a very good man.
What's the opposite of caveat emptor?
So and it is that this is when our customers are making a buying decision, then they're not buying something and then going off, maybe coming back once a year for a checkup. It is a long-term relationship, and I think that's why we as a vendor, most of our customers are in their second or third generation systems with us.
Yeah.
But there's something about us as buyers that I think needs to shift, and I think a few of you heard me on my soapbox about being poor buyers. We've created an environment where we've allowed ourselves to spec and output rather than buying service or entering into partnerships. So it's actually incredibly difficult, because I see on both sides, the move towards service provision and multi-tenant, one end of that. We have to buy like that too, and I think this sort of old world, the thing I find myself really struggling with in play-out world is, we have a pile of capital, we depreciate it by 5, we give you your shiny room with the blue button, and of course, and the next person who comes along wants a red button in a green room, and actually there are no economies. So from your side of the fence, very difficult to pass on those benefits, and from our side, a real plea to say, we're moving into a software world where, coming back to ROI, the flexibility won't be there unless this becomes products with very little customisation, rather than the other way around, which is what we're living today.
So I think a key question as our industry is changing is about product life cycles.
Yeah.
Because we can get amazing performance in the consumer market every 6 months. Yeah.
Yep.
Other brands of smartphone are available. But for the kind of products that have to be developed for our special industry, they have to last longer than that. What's the right life cycle for these products to get a good ROI?
I think you've got to look at it from a business perspective. Let's not look at it from the product's perspective or the technology perspective.
Fair enough.
We have to look at it from the business. So what are you trying to achieve in the business? What is what you're putting in going to last 5 years? Is it going to last 10 years? Is it going to last a year? It's really about.
So what's the answer? How far can we look? Because on-screen behaviour is changing.
Well, let me. I mean, one of our clients, Discovery, has had our system in for 10 years and is still using it. ITFC Deluxe now has had it in since 2003 and still using it. And those are the sorts of things. Those you've got to make sure, as vendors, we have to make sure that the software products, and let's be honest, that's really what we're talking about today, rather than anything hardware particularly, have got to be capable of being expanded, enhanced, taken forward using new technologies without wholesale replacement. And that I think is one of the big things. But you've really got to push that in at the CFO, CEO. To your point, Sinead, about bad buyers and that, I think a number of areas, the lawyers, the procurement departments, and that actually put things in the way of good buying practice for software, agile software projects these days.
I think that's very true. I mean, I think the move from, if you like, bespoke hardware solutions to what is ultimately software running on commodity hardware has fundamentally changed the way that this works. And I think it's also part of the shift there from we use the words supplier and partner sometimes interchangeably, but I don't think they are quite interchangeable. Perhaps in the past you bought a box and you stuck it in a rack somewhere, and then you didn't necessarily need to have much of a relationship with the supplier because it was fairly static what it was going to do. Software doesn't work like that. It is by its very nature an ongoing relationship. But also with that comes a much more flexible opportunity to think about its life cycle. There's some software we buy and we know we're going to use it for 3 months. And there's other things we buy thinking, well, this is probably going to be around in the estate for a very long time and a whole number of years.
And would you say, with software, often you don't get the best out of it in the first run? I can say in the last 5 years as broadcast innovation, I've been called into customer situations where a CTO said, in short order, Russ, you've got to get rid of this man. He's killing us, And that's perhaps 6 months in when the marriage guidance has broken down and everyone's frustrated. And in no case was that the right thing to do. In most of those cases, customers who said they were nice were actually not keeping their side of the deal in IT security, network provision, meaningful test environments, things like this.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think that goes down to that very open and honest conversation at the outset, rather than through the legal, contractual, those sort of environments.
So a question. So back to ROI. Yeah. So what we're talking about is risk and reward here. Somebody said to me over the coffee break, the thing I think about is who owns the ROI? Who's responsible for it? Who's the champion? Any views on that?
Within an organisation or what?
Yeah, within a project, within a new service.
Within our business, it's increasingly a product management function. So, and we use that term quite generally, and even though we create services, so somebody has a P&L for a particular service, underpinned by some technology and operational activity, and they focus on the P side of that in particular, and my organisation involved in development is making sure the L side maps with expectations in terms of cost to build, speed of delivery, and so on. So I think that's a good model to use.
So it's internal product management
Yes.
made of vendors' products into your service.
Well, in our case, sometimes we build entirely native systems, multi-year, multi-million pound investments, and the whole stack we build from scratch. In other areas, it's almost entirely third-party vendor infrastructure glued together by our own platform layer, and often in between those two extremes.
And what can you measure to prove your ROI? How can you be objective about that? Because just working is not good enough.
So we touched earlier on what are the key things you're going to achieve? Operational savings. Well, you can measure that. Something that we're doing increasingly within our business is the technology function that's building the platform is also bringing in operational expertise to design the way to use the platform.
Right.
So you have an operational team who use the platform. They can be measured on how efficiently they use the platform. We can build data and instrumentation within our software to see how effective each individual, group, department is, and whether it aligns with the original hope and prediction from product management. And of course, you keep that iterating so you can make sure you don't find yourself way off track at some point.
So a kind of supply chain approach.
Yeah, but we end up so we design how to use the platform, and we are fortunate in that the users are our own staff. You don't have that luxury so much, but so we can say to our own staff, this is exactly how you'll use it because this is the way that we've designed it to be used, and then we'll monitor its usage. And if we designed it wrong, we'll change the software. And if the operation team said this is getting in the way, we'll change the operational practice. But closing that relationship and that loop between operations and technology is one example.
Interesting. I'm well aware of where the bar is, by the way, but I just wanted to open up the floor to the audience. Are there some questions, please? Are you all still awake? Come on.
Where's the bar?
If you ask me a question, I'll promise that Ben has to answer it. Nothing? Okay. So I'm going to have to go and look on a piece of paper now.
There's a question from Steve Salmon at the back.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve. Come on, Steve.
You can.
Is all this true?
Absolutely true.
Okay. So one final question from the audience earlier on.
Question to Russell.
Yeah, great.
Neil Romanek from TV Technology Europe. I just wanted to hear a bit more. You were talking about that assessing the relationship with the with the vendor, and I just wondered if you ran into that thing of maybe a vendor having or a supplier having a great product or great technology, and then maybe on the other side of it, not sure if the relationship was going to be good, or the other way around. This is a great relationship. Not so sure about the technology, but can we develop something with them? Those two sides of that.
Well, that's buyer behaviour. People buy from people they like. But what's that got to do with ROI? What are you thinking?
I think you're asking how do we...
Just managing that, kind of getting that, getting the best return.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's a more complicated picture than just choosing the best product and running with it.
Yeah.
To manage both those things at the same time.
I think that the adversarial approach to procurement really limits that long-term relationship.
Absolutely. And I think to answer that, I don't think you should be looking at buying the product. You should be looking at what value your business is going to get from a partnership, and that has a combination of both product and the company you're buying from and all the rest of it. So I don't think there's a single answer to whether it should be what you're looking at buying the product. It's what value is it going to add to my business?
I think the danger is to make sure that we don't apply the same approach to procurement that you might do with very transactional, commoditized services, where it really is about price or terms and conditions or things like that, and actually understand when it's that, but actually when what you're really looking for something which is going to go on a journey with you, which increasingly is what we're looking for, where actually it's as much about the relationship and do you believe in the product roadmap of that particular vendor? Do you actually think that you're going to have a working relationship with them? How much are they going to value the suggestions for their roadmap? How much can you input into them as well? Because it's two way. It's not just about that, and how much as customers can we help vendors to develop their products in a direction which is going to help us?
I think the specialist vendors, it's easy. You can find their heart. The larger vendors, it's more difficult, isn't it, to find your way in and get the relationship you need at times. Sometimes you want a generic, homogenous relationship. But everybody demanded COTS, It breaks my heart when I hear, it's just software. That's just an awful thing to say, because it can be millions of man-hours in that. If you want to buy a CD with Apple Final Cut Pro on it or IBM something, the terms and conditions are written on the back of the CD, that's your lot. There's a million man-hours of code in there, and when that gets transferred into the specialist products, that's just not fair.
But there's a lot of wasted hours on dense RFP processes, which I think we really need to start thinking about how we get past that, because frankly, being good at sitting and filling in pieces of paper is not what any of us are buying into. And of course there's some maths and there's some trust, but it's all about trust. I work with you guys and I have to trust that you will make the right decisions. We've worked really hard to have a good positive relationship going both ways, and to make sure that's meaningful, that we are actually doing stuff that isn't just day to day. And in that relationship, I might say it's two-way. We get feedback too. We're not always right. And I think it's okay to behave like that. And I guess you're right, trying to think about how you score that. I think it's about exposing a number of the team. I think it's really important that when you enter into something that's much more long-term, that more of the business is exposed, because there are different relationships and different layers and different needs. So for us, it's about a long lead time of spending time together, of working out if we trust each other and we quite like each other, of this marketplace is a puddle. It's not long before you bump into someone who said, I had a good or a bad experience. So let's face it, that's where the work gets done. And there are a lot of good suppliers, and what's joyous for us is when we get to a difficult decision. That's when you've done your work well. When it's coming down to actually, I could work with both of these parties. However, start with the strategy, does it meet that, and then into the cash, I think. Yeah.
Well, I see that the great hand of time is moving to the top of the clock, and the man here is signalling me. So thank you very much. Quick wrap up. Two things I'm really surprised about. I like Tom's idea about starting at zero. That's very healthy. And I'm surprised and thrilled at the amount of value in ROI you attach to the intangibles from both sides. I thought you were going to be more prescriptive and more scientific, but then I wouldn't have understood. So thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for the panel, please?